The year is 910 AD. It has been more than 40 years since Alfred has been living this fight. A mere Count of Dorset had now become the Emperor of Britannia. Quite a feat for a man. Prevailing against the sons of Ragnar, smelting down the broken realms to forge out the kingdom of England and Wales, breaking the pride of the Viking world by sacking Sweden, uniting Scotland with the rest of the land, and finally forming the Empire of Britannia. But a wise man like Alfred knew that empires are brittle. They look hard but break easily, and that is what worried Alfred. Two of his sons, whom he had been grooming for years to step up as kings and emperors, were now dead. His youngest son, Adolf, was nothing much than a symbolic prince, while his daughters contested for the Scottish claim. No wonder to Alfred, her beloved Cecilia was leading the race. But for the empire, Alfred's legitimate heir was now his 13-year-old grandson. It would be a crime to force the burden of an unstable empire upon such a young shoulder. Alfred decided, for as long as the fate would allow, he would do everything possible so that his grandson and many generations after him would rule this empire with peace. Eventually, he would turn towards Ireland. But before that, Alfred decided he would go after the remaining Scottish lords, who were yet to bend before Alfred. In his quest, he declared war on the northeastern duchy of Moray. The rebellious Scottish lord soon called upon his Icelandic allies, nothing that Alfred couldn't handle. His trained men marched from one battle to another, from one city to the other. As Alfred proudly looked upon his invincible army, a news shook him. His new capital was being sacked by some unholy Viking. These brigands have always been doing so. Wherever they smell war, they come aboard their longships and raid an unprotected land. Cowards. But this time, they have crossed the line. They raided Alfred's capital. Alfred immediately dispersed half his army to deal with those raiders. Seeing Alfred's army, the raiders sailed back to their holes. Even though the raid was foiled, but the damage was already done. Many valuable artifacts and coins were sacked. Ensured that the raiders were not coming back, Alfred ordered his men back to Scotland. The raiders hindered the progress Alfred had made in his Scottish war. But eventually, his men subdued the enemy and claimed the victory for Alfred. After the victory, Alfred now had another plan in his mind. The raiders that raided Alfred's capital were commissioned by none other than the son of Sigurd Ragnarsson, who now was the king of Denmark. Alfred had sacked Sweden a few years ago. He had hoped that that would have taught these heathens a lesson. But no, they dared to cross Alfred again. So Alfred commissioned a claim on the very capital of Denmark. Perhaps with a base within their Nordic lands, Alfred could more efficiently handle these Vikings. It was time for Alfred to march on Denmark. Amassing his great army, Alfred sailed into the North Sea yet again. Alfred watched as the king of Denmark fled at the sight of his army. As he laid siege on Zealand, the capital realm of Denmark. Without any resistance, Zealand fell. There was no sign of the Danes as Alfred's army marched on to their next city. It was during the siege of Scone that the Danish king returned, and he was not alone. His plundered gold was put in use nicely, as 3,000 strong mercenary regiments accompanied the Danish king as he began to reclaim his capital city. With the sudden influx of enemy presence, Alfred began planning a counterattack. But that is when a news came from back home. Scotland was under siege by a Norwegian army. It seemed that the grandson of Ragnar Lodbrok had ensembled all of Scandinavia against Alfred. Alfred decided he would complete the siege of Scone and then would take up on the Danish army before returning to Britannia and finishing this war. But that was not to be. Another army soon joined the Danes. It was the Jom Vikings. Alfred, not wanting to lose the advantage, rushed towards the Danish army in Zealand. But his plan didn't go as he would have anticipated. The Danish reinforcement joined in much faster than Alfred's second army, and thus Alfred suffered a defeat after many years. If that was not enough, before Alfred could regroup, a peasant revolt erupted back home. Alfred was getting stifled from both outside and inside. But Alfred would not be threatened by some peasant. As Alfred ordered his men to board the ship, he somehow knew his adventures in Scandinavia might have ended. Though this was not the end Alfred might have wanted, but at least he had subdued another Viking capital. Hoping that was enough, Alfred sailed back to England. But before Alfred could even breathe, a son of Ivar declared war on Alfred to claim his father's old realm. And he was not alone. An army of 9,000 Vikings accompanied him. Alfred, wasting no time, ordered the expansion of his army. If he was to go down, he would take as many of these heathens with him as he could. Alfred, calming his mind, decided to first go for the peasant revolt in Wessex. With the death of his eldest son, his alliance with Bavaria had ended. Alfred needed new allies. He quickly arranged for the marriage of his youngest daughter with the son of the Frankish king. His armies began their assault on the peasant uprising. Before long, the revolt was quashed. Now, it was time to march on the Northmen. But to Alfred's dismay, his Frank allies were nowhere to be seen. It seemed they were dragged into another war of their own. If Alfred was to face the Northmen alone, so be it. He hired the mercenaries he could afford and began rallying his full force. The new regiments that he had ordered were almost ready now, amassing an army of 4 Housecarl regiment, 1 regiment of mercenary bowmen, followed by over 7,000 levies, and complemented by 30 knights. Alfred's war machine was rolling towards Scotland to face the Northern army. Soon, the two massive armies clashed. As more and more of Alfred's forces joined in, the Viking shield began to crack. But before the final blow could be delivered, the stories of common men end with them. But Alfred was no common man, so it would be unfair to end his tale here. On the one side, Alfred's grandson took over the empire, and on the battlefield, the Northmen had succumbed to Alfred's war machine. The new emperor could continue the war for the Danish duchy, But there was numerous challenges that laid before the young man. First was the dwindling economy. He could never go for an offshore adventure under such circumstances. Furthermore, the one reliable source of income that his grandfather, Alfred, always had was his goodwill with the papacy. That was something the young ruler lacked severely. Neither his bishop endorsed him, nor the Pope saw him in good light. He kept his armies on the land, using them only to squash any misadventure the Vikings would try. As the finances dwindled even further, multiple factions started to form against the young ruler, something that Alfred had foresighted. He tried to ease the grudge of his vassals by granting them more titles, but even after accepting those gifts, they would scheme again and again for more power. Even Hugo, husband to Cecilia, his grandfather's favorite, was among the conspirators of breaking the empire. After a gruesome year, the war for the claim of Zealand came to an end, and with it came heavy losses for the already broken treasury of the empire. The young emperor ransomed away all the nobility he had in his dungeon. Exhausting all the prisoners and knowing that he would have no love from the papacy, he turned to the other servants of God, the Templars. A loan from them steadied the empire, at least economically. Before long, the first faction rebelled. Alliances were made, and armies were raised quickly. With the first victory against the faction, another faction declared war. It was led by none other than the grandson of King Constantine of Alba. But the young emperor proved himself to be Alfred's grandson. Calming his mind, he gathered all the allies he could. While the second faction rampaged in Scotland, the armies of the empire wiped out the rebels from the south. Tactically and strategically, one after the other, the faction leaders were defeated. Though it lasted for 2 years, but finally the Liberty faction surrendered, accepting and saluting their new emperor from the dungeons. Now it was time to stabilize Scotland. Ransoming the imprisoned lords gave him enough coin to get him some hired help. And then, with the aid of his allies, the empire struck on the wishful rulers of Scotland. As the backbone of the faction was crushed, the armies of the empire sat on sieging and reclaiming the northern cities. But before victory could be claimed, a predictable yet unwanted event arose. It was the Northmen, back with another heathen army of thousands, to claim land in Britannia. The young emperor had few options. He could either pay them off, but only if he had anything to spare. The second one was to go on a war. The land of Britannia had been in war since the last 15 years. It did not seem to be the right option. The last one was to swallow his pride and grant the desired land to the Vikings, and in return the Vikings would declare peace and accept the empire as their overlords. Not a bad deal. Now that the Vikings were handled, the Scottish faction was eventually defeated and destroyed. With the end of the Long War, the finances of the empire were also slowly coming back to shape, and thus it took almost a decade for the empire to cope with the demise of Alfred and to move to its next chapter in history. Hi guys, with that we complete the campaign of Alfred. It had been an eventful 5 episode. We did try to get him going for some time more by going for the learning lifestyle and health perks, but it was not to be. Anyways, we did achieve the Rags to Riches achievement in the last episode. I just wanted to give a complete wrap on Alfred's adventures in today's episode, and hopefully I was able to do that. Anyways, keep up the support and do consider subscribing to the channel. Please do leave any feedback you have in the comments. Thank you and have a great day.